Hello, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. We're at it again. We've got another installment of Central Rocks, the geology talk show here, taped on the campus of Central Washington University. I'm your host, Nick Zentner. Thank you for joining us today. You've seen the program. You know that we visit with geology professors and students here at Central Washington University, and today is no exception to that, however, with a special twist. Don Ringe, who taught geology here at Central for years and years, is really kind to come in and visit with us today. A quick word about Don. Both bachelor's and master's degrees in geology from the University of Idaho in Moscow back in the 1950s, and then a PhD in geology from Washington State University in the 1960s. Don, multiple decades of teaching at Central. Don, can I shake your hand? Welcome you to the program.
Fine, thank you. Glad to be here.
Hey, it's a pleasure to have you here, Don. You're just down the street. I see you working out regularly, and thought I'd have you come in and visit with us. Is it true that you started teaching at Central, your first stint, in 1961?
Mm-hmm.
1961. So can you give us I don't know, some sort of mental picture of what the university was like at that time, or where physically were you teaching on campus in 1961?
Well, most of the courses were still in Lind Hall, as they are, a lot of them are now.
Mm-hmm.
We did have, I guess at that time there was a science department, and all the sciences were lumped under really one chairman, if you will.
Sure.
And most of the groups were relatively small. When I came, George Beck had been the geologist for a number of years, and he retired the year before I came.
Yeah. Did you have any connection with him, by the way?
Never. I don't think I ever did meet George, or if I did, it was very casual.
Uh-huh.
My perception was that once George retired, he went away, and I don't remember whether he ever came back again or not. I don't remember seeing him.
Huh.
I remember meeting him just offhand a couple of times, but and then Bud Clucking came in and was kind of the resident geologist, but he was really more of a biologist, mm-hmm. more into the biology end of it, although he taught introductory geology. But I was hired in the physical sciences. One of the big courses they had at that time was called physical science, uh-huh. and it was a requirement.
Of all Central students?
I think pretty much all Central students, mm-hmm. so we had a ready-made class. But anyway, I was just simply hired as a one-year replacement. So the 3 years I was here, each year was simply a matter of convenience for the department.
Yeah.
So I was
right.
on a one-year contract, as it were.
And no geology degree at that time. It was people were just getting
In fact, I don't think we offered anything maybe beyond introductory geology and physical science.
Just a question for those former students who may be watching. What room did you teach that general science class in? Was that in upstairs in the second floor of Lind Hall?
No, most generally they were in the auditorium room on the main floor there.
Floor down there, gotcha. So all sciences were still operating in Lind Hall at the time that you were there, and that's chemistry and biology still was there? And
what botany there was. Physics.
Yeah.
So they were all in there, and most of the I'll call them departments were represented by either one or two people. None of them were really all that very big. Math was in there also. And science ed was in there.
Oh, sure.
so anything that had some kind of a science connotation was in Lind Hall.
And you had a master's degree at that time.
Yeah.
And kind of a yearly contract type of a thing, it sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
Did you grow to like Ellensburg enough that is that why you went on to get a PhD to come back and teach here, or was that not really the plan?
Well, I didn't have any great thing in mind. I recognized the fact that if I was going to stay teaching at the university level, I needed to get the diploma, if you will.
Yes, right.
So, anyway, after the third year, why it looked to me like it was going to be very unlikely I'd be offered another one-year contract, so I started looking at graduate schools and ended up at Washington State as one of their TAs.
What did you do your doctorate work on?
Well, I did it in the, oddly enough, in the Palouse country, pretty much right around Pullman and through that area, looking at really two different things. One was some idea of how thick the loess deposits are through that part of the country, and also how the loess relates to the basalt layers that are underneath it. It was certainly different than what a person would do nowadays. It was all done with electromagnetism. And so we'd go out and set up and run periodic measurements as you expanded the spread. And where you intersected the basalt horizon, well, you got a very much different kick in the, so it worked out pretty well to unravel some of the mysteries of how thick the loess was, especially in places where you don't see any basalt outcrops, and there aren't very many throughout most of the Palouse.
And then suddenly you find yourself back in Ellensburg. Was that an accident?
Well, it wasn't suddenly. I finished 2 years of grad study at Wazoo and had all the coursework out of the way, and Ann's family has some friends who were very strong affiliates with Pacific Lutheran. And Pacific Lutheran was looking for somebody to teach in the science area there. And so they plugged my name in, and I don't know how much of a search their PLU had done, but anyway, they offered me a contract. So Ann and I moved over there the summer of '66. And I finished up my dissertation while we were there and taught there for the 2 years. But I was, again, a single geologist in a science program, and I was teaching, again, a physical science course and then introductory geology classes and some of the mineralogy, that sort of thing. So I was very definitely limited in what I was going to be teaching without dredging up a whole bunch of new courses. So I reapplied here, and I suppose because some of the people around still remembered me, well, anyway, I ended up coming back here in the fall of '68.
And that's when you started teaching some of your trademark courses, like geomorphology?
Well, no, a lot of those evolved over time.
Oh, they did.
Marty Katz taught a geomorphology course. And so when I appeared, again, there were only 2 people on the staff here, Carl Newman and Steve Farkas. So we were only a 3-person department, as you will. So anyway, I started looking at some courses that would deal with the local geology and brought in initially Washington Northwest geology, I guess we called it, and tried to introduce some smaller courses that would work on probably attracting students, because at that time the big deal was to have a lot of student hours in your pocket. So.
And you did.
Yeah.
You were steady in there teaching.
So
year in and year out.
Anyway, we ended up with a different variety, and then after Bob Bentley showed up, we were up to 4 people, so we began to develop enough courses to get a major. And I don't honestly remember when our first major program showed up in the catalog, but I suppose early '70s somewhere.
Yeah, I started that alumni project trying to track down many of our graduates, and with your help was able to figure out that I think '69 was the first time there were some folks getting a degree in geology. And so very late '60s into the early '70s, and then things were up and running. And it's interesting to note the differences between the department then and the department now as far as the amount of teaching versus research. You guys were teaching.
Yeah.
And there wasn't time for research,
Not much.
Or at least the way the contracts were, how you were rewarded or what your jobs were, it was supposed to be X number of hours in the classroom.
Most of the time we were carrying 15 hours as a kind of the standard load. And we really didn't have a whole lot of funding to go out and do much in the way of research, and we didn't have any equipment to speak of. There was nothing technical about our approach to geology, except for a Brunton compass and a few things like that. So we were very much field oriented, and we turned out some very good field geologists.
Absolutely right. And the way you delivered many of those courses was visually based.
Yeah.
You had slides almost every day, as far as I remember you talking. Was that a philosophy you developed over the years, or you've always been a photographer and wanted to get that in the classes from the start?
Much of my attitude goes back to my major professor at Wazoo. Dave Rahm was a geomorphologist, basically, and he was my mentor as far as the program goes there. And I was very impressed with Dave's approach because he made it very visual. He had the idea that you could understand some of the items of geology a whole lot better if you could see an actual picture of one or where it was, or try to draw word pictures. He was also a great sketch artist. He'd sometimes stand up in front of the class and make these great elaborate diagrams, which I never did try to follow up on. But anyway, he was also a pilot.
Oh, that's right.
And he had a Piper Cub that he flew around in, so he had a drop of a hat, we'd head off and fly somewhere around and look over the land, and he would float here and there, and ultimately ended up killing himself. But anyway, that was a great loss, but I certainly came away with a number of ideas about how to approach geology, and I always tried to make it very visual.
Well, that's certainly one way to bring the visual aspect home, is to show the slides. Another is to actually get out and see it in the field, and you were pretty steady with that as well.
Right.
Was that an annual, did you do that spring break trip regularly?
Yeah, I haven't even know how many years we did it. Bentley and I did the very first one. It was kind of a drop of the hat. We didn't have any particular itinerary in mind. We just, we had a day to leave and a day to get back and that sort of thing. And in the interim, we kind of went hither and yon. I don't think either one of us knew a whole lot about the Southwest, but it was a good excursion for us.
Sure.
And education for us also. So we toured through different parts of the Southwest. And at that time, it was all geology majors. And I think Bob and I did it for a couple of years, and then he went off in the summer. He got involved in some of the basalt studies, and so I went ahead and, I don't know, through most of that, then continued doing it. And every so often we'd have somebody in the department that was interested in going along, and so Ralph Higgins came, I think, before Jim Hinthorn did, and he was a California grad, so he knew quite a bit of the areas down through that part of the country. So he and I went on 2 or 3 trips together with classes, but gradually those excursions got to be about maybe half geology majors and half people who simply were interested, and we tried to keep the numbers to, I suppose around 20.
2 or 3 vans maybe?
So we didn't get overwhelmed. And it was fun, but it was also a lot of planning and a certain amount of pain in the butt.
Yeah. I think your last one was my first one. We did that trip to Death Valley, and you kind of passed the torch on to myself, and I did a number of those in the 1990s, and then, to be honest, I kind of burnt out about doing. I wanted a little time.
Well, it
for
took a
myself.
lot of organization, because you had to plan on where you're going to eat, where you're going to stay.
Sure.
I hated to travel. The first time we went, we just crashed wherever we happened to be, and I got a little taken aback with that. Initially, we didn't have any women on the trips, and so the addition of having ladies along made a lot of difference on our attitude to where to camp. And
So what are some examples of locations for some of those spring break trips?
well, let's see, we went down through along some of the San Andreas Fault, through Hollister, California, any number of places through the Sierras, Death Valley. We took several trips to the Grand Canyon.
You also did some field teaching with our field camp, not during spring break time, in summer, I assume, or maybe
No,
late
this was
spring?
during spring quarter.
Oh, you did it during spring quarter.
Yeah. And there were, well, let's see, Bentley and I guess Farkas and I did the spring quarter class. The year Mount St. Helens erupted, we were on our way to field camp, and we were headed across the desert west of Salt Lake, or Ogden, Salt Lake City, when the news came out that Mount St. Helens had erupted, and there were hundreds dead and thousands injured and catastrophes everywhere. The early reports were really kind of weird and wild.
Wow.
But anyway, we were on our way to field camp, so we went and made our locality in the field camp, and it was Monday night before I was able to get in touch with the family and find out everything was all right. It was dusty, but but okay. So we didn't even get back until, maybe 2.5 or 3 weeks after the eruption.
You probably had no inkling that St. Helens was about to go. Do you have any honest recollection of you?
Well, I remember reading Rocky Crandall's little thing on Mount St. Helens, and with a kind of parting statement that he said it would erupt one of these days.
Oh yeah.
And so that was rather prophetic for sure.
Do you remember delivering that news before 1980? That, or you, at least you were
Well,
aware of?
I don't know, maybe in passing I would let people know that these are not necessarily, well, everybody at that time really looked at volcanoes pretty much as being dormant or extinct, or there was a little bubbling here and there at Mount Rainier and a little at Mount Baker, but everything else was pretty much quiet. So it took a while for somebody to have the nerve to say, well, you better watch out.
Well, when these events don't happen more than once a century, something like that,
People lose touch.
That's right.
Lose touch. One of the things that has really been great is that the Northwest provides probably more geology than any place else in the country. And it might have taken a couple, 3 days to get around and look at some of it, or maybe even longer, but I could really not imagine teaching some of the introductory geology classes, or most in a place like Kansas or Nebraska, or where you can't see anything but flat land as far as you go, and you get the sense that the students probably wouldn't care a whole lot either if you were doing everything and say, wow, if you could go here, you can see this. Well, around here, if you go there, you can see that.
You sure can. You sure can.
And it's easy to get to.
Well, we were lucky to have you teach here for so long and leave your mark on so many students that we've had here. And the testimonials keep coming in about Don Ringe. Where's Don these days? I say, well, 2nd Avenue. See him on campus if you keep your eyes open long enough. So I really appreciate you coming on the program today, Don.
No problem.
Hey, and to you, kind viewer, dear viewer, thank you for watching again this installment of Central Rocks, taped here in Ellensburg, Washington. I appreciate you watching. Hope you tune in again sometime. Thanks a lot.